If you look at the promotional material for Japan's Mogami-class frigate, you see exactly what they want you to see. The stealth shaping, the futuristic integrated mast, the clean lines that make it look like a sci-fi render rather than a floating piece of steel. They pitch it as the next evolution of high-tech naval warfare. But that is a convenient half-truth. The Mogami isn't the result of a navy trying to be cool. It is the result of a navy trying to survive. Japan isn't building these ships because they discovered a revolutionary new way to fight. They are building them because they are running out of the most critical component in any weapon system: human beings. This isn't a story about a boat. It's a story about a demographic collapse, a strategic panic in the Indo-Pacific, and why Australia, a country with an entire continent to defend, just decided to bet its maritime future on a Japanese design that was never originally meant to leave Tokyo Bay. We need to stop looking at the spec sheet and start looking at the strategy. Because when you strip away the marketing, the Mogami tells us exactly how scared the Pacific nations really are. For most of the Cold War, the JMSDF lived inside a very clear division of labor. The US Navy would project power, Japan would protect the sea lanes. Japanese destroyers and frigates were optimized, almost obsessively, for anti-submarine warfare. Crews were large, specialization was deep, and endurance was less critical because American logistics and nearby bases filled the gaps. Classes like Hatsuyuki, Asagiri, and Abukuma reflected that worldview. 200 sailors per hull wasn't excess, it was doctrine. To understand this ship, you have to throw away the Western definition of a frigate. In Japan, the 30 FFM, the Mogami, is a break from 50 years of naval tradition. For decades, the Japan Maritime Self-Defense Force built ships like the Asagiri or Hatsuyuki classes. These were floating labor camps. They were heavy, maintenance-intensive, and required crews of about 200 sailors just to function effectively. That worked fine in the 1980s. Today, Japan's population chart looks like a coffin. The Navy simply cannot find 200 young, able-bodied men and women for every escort ship in the fleet. They physically do not exist. Recruitment targets are missed year after year. So, the design requirement for the Mogami wasn't more missiles or bigger radar. The hard requirement was 90 crew members. That is a staggering reduction. They cut the human requirement by more than half. This forced a level of radical automation that most Western navies are still just talking about in PowerPoint presentations. The Combat Information Center is circular, designed to let a handful of operators manage the entire battle space using augmented reality and massive sensor fusion. Engine control, damage control, firefighting, it's all routed through systems designed to replace human hands. This isn't luxury, it's institutional survival. If the Mogami required 200 men, it would stay pierside. Automation is the only reason the hull can leave the dock in the 2030s. The changes go deeper than just who is driving the ship. It's about what the ship is actually for. During the Cold War, the deal was simple. The US Navy was the sword, Japan was the shield, specifically an anti-submarine warfare shield. Japanese destroyers were specialized sub-hunters. The Mogami abandons that specialization. It is a creature of the gray zone, that space between peace and total war. Japan realized that a conflict with China might not start with a hypersonic barrage. It might start with a fishing boat laying mines in a commercial strait. It might start with unmanned drones harassing merchant traffic. So, the Mogami has a massive mission bay in the stern. It's designed to launch unmanned underwater vehicles, UUVs, and unmanned surface vehicles, USVs, specifically for mine warfare. This is critical. Japan is an island nation with zero natural resources. If you mine the approaches to Tokyo, the economy dies in weeks. The Mogami is a minesweeper disguised as a stealth frigate. And let's talk about that stealth. The unicorn mast, that distinct clean tower, consolidates every antenna into one housing to reduce the radar cross-section. In a theater saturated by shore-based anti-ship missiles, being seen means being dead. The Mogami is built to operate inside the threat ring, keeping supply lines open while staying invisible. This is where the story usually ends for most analysts. Japan built a modern ship. The end. But then, the Australians showed up. For decades, Japan operated under strict, self-imposed bans on weapon exports. This created a weird industry where Japanese ships were incredible, gold-plated, as we say, but astronomically expensive because they only built a handful of them. But by 2014, Tokyo did the math. The cost of building specialized ships for just themselves was unsustainable. Mitsubishi Heavy Industries needed volume, or the shipyards would atrophy. Exporting weapons stopped being a moral taboo and became a national security imperative. Enter Australia. The Royal Australian Navy is currently staring into an abyss. Their current frigates are tired. They tried to buy a high-end British design, but that program is expensive, complex, and taking forever. Australia needed holes in the water, and they needed them yesterday. The choice of the Mogami for Australia is a geopolitical earthquake. By buying Japanese, Canberra is diversifying its security portfolio. But here is the catch. The ship Australia is buying is not the ship Japan is sailing. This is where geography dictates engineering. The Japanese 30 FFM is about 5,500 tons fully loaded. It's compact. It's designed for the inner seas, the Sea of Japan, the East China Sea. It operates close to friendly bases. It doesn't need massive fuel tanks because a Japanese port is never far away. Australia doesn't have that luxury. Australia suffers from the tyranny of distance. The Australian variant is a beast compared to the original. It's longer, stretched to around 142 meters. It pushes over 6,000 tons. Why? Not just to fit more toys. It's for seakeeping and logistics. The Indian Ocean and the South Pacific are unforgiving. You need a bigger hull to maintain stability in Sea State 6, so your crew doesn't exhaust themselves just trying to stand up. You need massive internal volume for fuel, food, and spare parts, because you might be patrolling 3,000 miles away from the nearest friendly tanker. The Japanese ship is a sprinter. The Australian ship is a marathon runner. Then there is the brain of the ship. The original Mogami is fiercely Japanese. It uses a Japanese combat management system, Japanese radar, Japanese sonars. These are excellent systems, but they are autarkic. They speak Japanese, digitally speaking. The Australian Navy operates as an appendage of the US Navy. They cannot afford a ship that doesn't plug directly into the American kill chain. So, the Australian Mogami rips out the Japanese brain. It will likely run a US-compatible system like Aegis, or Saab's 9LV. It demands Cooperative Engagement Capability, CEC. This means the frigate becomes a node. It can fire a missile at a target it can't even see, guided by data from an F-35 or a destroyer hundreds of miles away. And the weapons? The Japanese ship carries 16 vertical launch cells, mostly for self-defense. The Australian version doubles that to 32 cells. They are packing ESSM Block II missiles. This changes the tactical profile entirely. The Japanese ship defends itself. The Australian ship can perform local area defense. It can sit next to a high-value supply ship and shield it from incoming fire. That is vital for a navy that needs to protect long, lonely supply lines across the Pacific. So, what are we really looking at here? We are looking at the high-low mix strategy finally hitting reality. Australia realized it couldn't afford a fleet composed entirely of super expensive destroyers. They needed numbers. As the old naval saying goes, quantity has a quality all its own. The Mogami offers a low-risk industrial solution because the Japanese are actually building them on time, combined with high-end combat capability. If you look closely at these two ships, you don't just see steel and radar. You see the Japanese Mogami as a fortress wall, efficient, automated, and defensive, built by a nation bunkering down to protect its core. You see the Australian Mogami as an expeditionary scout, long-legged, heavily armed, and networked, built by a middle power trying to project influence across an ocean that is getting more dangerous by the day. They share the same hull, but they have completely different souls. And the fact that these two nations are aligning their industries to build them tells you everything you need to know about the coming decade in the Pacific. If this analysis made you rethink what military strength actually looks like, if it made you realize it's more about demographics and fuel tanks than just missile counts, smash that subscribe button. We don't do propaganda here, we do reality. And in the comments, tell me, is relying on automation to solve a recruitment crisis a brilliant move, or a single point of failure waiting to happen? I'll see you in the next one. Stay critical.